All right, everybody, welcome to the show. Welcome to the episode. We are gonna kind of kick it off here. I'll give the introduction and we'll go from there. So today's guest is a lifelong athlete. In her soccer career, she was D3 National Midfielder of the Year, an All-American, and Hall of Fame inductee at Johns Hopkins University. She would then go on to compete in the US and Brazil at the semi-professional level in that sport before transitioning to track. Amongst her savage accomplishments, she now competes for Team USA in track. Not many athletes do what she did in one sport, let alone two. And I'm a big believer that a coach must get their hands dirty in the gym as well as in a competitive arena to best understand their athletes. And she's done just that. In her coaching career, Erica specializes with youth S&C with a particular focus on female athletes. Many of her athletes have gone on to achieve similar levels of success, citing Erica as a major role player in their endeavors. Erica, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, yeah. So I guess like to start off, like I'm very curious to dive into, your athletic career, and when you realized that coaching would become, a real major part of your life.
Yeah, so I started playing soccer when I was 6 years old. I just played for a local rec team, and I actually did that all the way through age 13. So I didn't really switch into the travel system until around high school, which sounds really crazy today in today's world with like U8 travel teams. So I really fell in love with soccer naturally. I just had fun with it, and I was able to try other sports when I was young, like gymnastics, ballet. I played a lot of lacrosse. I always did sprinting and track. And I just got a variety of motor skills and I built my athleticism. But all during that childhood, I also played a lot. I had an older brother. I always played with his friends in the neighborhood. We did like tackle football, capture the flag, all those fun games from the 90s that were really good for our speed and agility. And yeah, it was just a very active childhood. And as I was going through it, I fell in love with soccer a lot and I just kept going with it on the side. And then by the time I turned 13, I said to my parents, I'm ready to try out for a travel team. I love this so much. This is the sport I want to choose and start to specialize in now that I'm a teenager. And when I started to get serious about soccer, I played for the best team in the state of Maryland at the time, Bethesda Soccer Club. And I went to all the showcases and got recruited by Division 1 schools in the Big Ten, the ACC, but I ended up choosing a Division 3 school, Johns Hopkins University, because I really wanted to go to a smaller school and I wanted to go to an academic school. And I think a lot of people nowadays would be like, you're crazy for doing that. But I'm really glad I did it because I had such a fun time at Hopkins. I was able to play a lot of minutes, started all 4 years, really impacted the program. And I just love the culture of the team. And I really liked the traditions the coach had and all the fun things we did with the girls. Those were some of my favorite moments from college soccer. So that's why I went D3. And I forgot to mention that when I was young, I started doing strength and conditioning really seriously, starting in late middle school. And I stuck with it all the way through the length of my soccer career. And I still do strength training today as a coach, but I also just do it for myself just to stay healthy and to support my master's track competitions now.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, tell me a little bit about the Masters track scene. I'm just curious. Don't know too much about it. Like, how do you even go try out for it?
Yeah, so my mentor, Cynthia Monteleone, told me about it. She's also a strength coach, but she works with a lot of Olympic sprinters, but also masters track athletes. So the masters division is age 35 and up, and
Hmm.
she competed in the 50 and up, and she had told me that she was winning gold medals as a 50-year-old and running faster than she was as a D1 track athlete. And I was
Whoa,
like, I
cool.
want to do this. So I started to work with her, and she's my mentor now. She's my sprint coach. She also does my nutrition and metabolics. And after working with her, I soon realized, wow, I can really change my body composition, my performance, my internal health for the better. I mean, we were getting blood work this whole time while we were training and just really focusing on both health and performance. And yeah, I still do it. And I don't know when I'm going to do my next meet. I'm just kind of in this like training phase now. And hopefully we'll compete next year again with Team USA.
Sick. That's awesome. Yeah. And so I guess tell me like how did you choose kind of the events, you wanted to do and everything? Obviously, like, transitioning sports is hard. But you probably had some things you knew you were naturally good at in that realm. So
Yeah, well, I actually did a season of track in high school while I was
cool.
also playing soccer, and I only did sprints because I just love the idea of running as fast as possible for less than
Yeah.
30 seconds and calling it a day. So I've always loved the sprint events. And yeah, I competed recently in the 60-meter indoor, and then the next event I'll do is probably the 60-meter and the 200-meter.
Cool.
Cynthia's trying to convince me to do the 400, and I'm like, I don't like the 400.
Different ball game. Yeah.
But yeah, so I've always loved sprinting, and I think it's really good for your health too as you continue to get older. I believe it's the fountain of longevity and youth.
100%. 100% agree with you. And I guess like to kind of start to dive into the topic for today, obviously we, talking about youth ACL epidemic and such, but I'm curious, like, obviously we get these athletes at a young age, right? And we are seeing that, from age basically 11 and on, there's a massive spike in these kinds of injuries happening across all sports, and I'm really curious, like in the vein of the fountain of youth, right? Like starting with the basics and understanding kind of like what an ACL injury is, how it happens, and what are kind of some of the considerations, in that aspect.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to unpack here. So, first and foremost, the pediatric ACL injury rate is the highest it's been, and it's
Mm-hmm.
only increased in the past several years. And it's funny because growing up, I didn't really hear what an ACL tear was until I was maybe 16 years old. There wasn't that much talk about it, and there wasn't
Mm-hmm.
so much fear around it because it wasn't happening too much. But I also think back then, not a lot of people were focused on training to prevent ACL. People were focused on training to just become faster and stronger athletes. And that's why I did strength and conditioning young. I just wanted to become a faster, stronger, and more powerful player and just level up my soccer game. And as a nice result of that, I stayed very healthy. I didn't have any ACL tears during my middle high school and college career, no crazy surgeries during that time. The minor like ankle sprains here and there, but it's hard to go through your career unscathed with those minor injuries. But yeah, back then the focus was really performance. And if you had a good performance program, as a result, you would be able to minimize that ACL injury risk. I would
Mm-hmm.
also say back then we were outside playing more. We were more active as kids. Now a lot of kids are staying inside and their parents have to kind of nag them to go outside or get off the iPad. And we got that richness of movement young. So
Mm-hmm.
we were able to develop a really solid foundation of motor skills like balance, coordination, stability, mobility. And then by the time we were in high school and we were specializing, we were prepared for it.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, we have kids going into the travel system on a poor foundation. They don't have the stability, they don't have the mobility. They can't decelerate without flailing their arms or maybe falling over or planting the foot too wide. And that's how ACL tears happen, is it's a wrong plant and it's
Mm-hmm.
being unstable and not being able to pump the brakes well. So there is a lot that goes into it, but I'd say first and foremost, we need to look at, okay, what happened during an athlete's childhood and did they get that solid foundation of motor skills? And nowadays it really is few and far between. And I can tell you, a lot of the girls who come into my gym now for their initial assessment, I always ask this question: do you play any other sport besides soccer? Did you play
Mm-hmm.
anything else when you were younger? And I can't remember the last time I got a yes.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Got it. That's fascinating. No, I would assume you'd at least like know one or two, but that's wild. Like, so I guess there's a few parts of that I want to unpack. The first being the kind of training history of a youth athlete, right? And I guess we're looking at ages. It sounds like you get them kind of 13 and up predominantly. Am I correct in saying that? Okay, so then let's talk about pre-13, right? You talked about like cognitive development and just getting essentially that first decade of play right under your belt before you start, specializing or doing those other things. Like, what should that look like, in your mind in those youngest ages?
As much variety as possible.
Hmm.
So just think about all the activities we did as kids and all those fun games, jump rope, hopscotch, really building that reactive strength. Those can be considered plyometrics that are fun. So
Hmm.
really building the ligaments and the tendons and different muscle groups, or even just jumping from trees or hopping over
Yeah.
things. We were really like building, building, building. So I think it's just anything that's play and just different motor skills, sprinting a lot too, and getting that high speed exposure. And also, like you mentioned, the cognitive component. I'm a huge fan of play and reactive drills and getting my athletes in very spontaneous environments because that's the game. The game is never the same each time, and there's always going to be new decisions, fast decisions that have to be
Hmm.
made. And there's a lot of research that athletes who react slower and they have slower decision-making skills are actually at a higher risk for ACL injury. And Jason Abedijian, who is the head of performance at Clemson, I think he's still there. He wrote a few papers back in 2020, 2021 talking about this, how those slower reaction speeds, not having that spatial awareness in high pressure situations can ruin lower body mechanics and cause missteps. So it's super fascinating when we look at the big picture. It is motor skill strength, but there's also the cognitive component and making sure even with our older athletes, we're doing some play, we're doing fun reactive and mirror drills and changing the stimulus, whether it's a different visual stimulus or an audio stimulus. It has to be something that's mixed up, so that we
Yeah.
can really mimic the game and the chaos of it.
Mm. I love that element of chaos you're kind of talking about. Having worked with high school athletes, like you're saying, every play is different. Every defensive scheme you go against is different. Offensive scheme you go against is different. And so you're going to need repetition, of chaos to essentially meet that. Now, from like, what would be like a basic prescription you would recommend that other strength coaches tell parents, right, when they come with kids, that are like 8 years old and they're thinking about starting to train their kids and such? Like, what are some kind of fundamental recommendations that we can be giving those young kids?
I think you have to have like a system in place that you give parents. So like
Hmm.
be really clear on what your pathway is and why you're doing it, why they need to play at these ages and get that variety and what's going on in their growth and development. And I have a handout I give parents, and it's really
Hmm.
detailed and it goes into why we do what we do. And some of them understand it. But then some of them are like, well, screw that. I'm going to send my 8-year-old to the coach down the street who's going to attach them to a parachute and do training like Messi.
Yeah.
So you
Yep.
will get that. And even in 14 years of doing this, I still get parents like that. And
Of course.
all you can do as a strength coach working with youth in the private sector is educate the best you can. Have your system ready, have your handouts ready, and explain it and defend it. And I
Hmm.
think a lot of parents will catch on, but you will have those few people that just, it'll go in one ear and out the other.
Of course.
Yesterday, I had a dad text me asking for my advice when really I think he just wanted my justification. But he was like, yeah, my 7-year-old is on travel soccer team. She also just made the travel flag football team, and she's technically going to have no days off. Like, I don't want her to burn out. What do you recommend? So I sent this long dissertation back to him, and I
Yeah. Yeah.
said, I don't even recommend 7 days of training for my professional and college athletes. So
No,
for
no
your
way. Yeah.
7-year-old, I don't recommend that either. And I gave him like research studies. Like
Yeah.
I just gave it all to him. And then all he said was, thank you very much. And I'm like, so basically you probably won't listen to what I just said,
Yeah.
but all I can do is speak the truth. And
Of
I
course.
think a lot of us are we're gonna stick out like a sore thumb, but that's okay.
Hmm. No, I love that, and having dealt with that kind of parent before myself, it's always frustrating, but nevertheless, like, yeah, you got to kind of keep fighting the good fight, in that respect, and supporting it with research and part of like the, kind of what you're talking about, I guess, is that cumulative fatigue, right? And just those repeated exposures to high intensity exercise, right? Whether it's soccer, flag football, whatever it is, just the nature of sport. Um, I'm kind of curious, like what you think the ideal sort of split maybe is a good way to think about it in off season and in season for these youth athletes. Obviously, playing two sports at once probably not going to work, like that dad was saying. But I'm curious, like let's work back from that. You know, like what is good? What should we kind of be aiming for realistically off season and in season?
Yeah, I do want to say I'm all for early sampling of multiple sports, but I'm not for when it's in the same season and the sports overlap with similar movements. So
Hmm.
that can be a cause for overuse too, because like this 7-year-old girl, that could lead to poor recovery, also burnout from constantly getting shuttled to these practices. So I don't recommend that, but I definitely recommend sampling sports in a different season. So
Hmm.
especially at that age, it's not that serious yet. It's okay if you leave your soccer team for a season. You're not going to lose like your starting position. I think a lot of parents think they're going to miss out, but they're 7. Like have them try different things in each season, and
Yeah,
you never know what sport they'll fall in love with. And if you
totally.
only force one sport on them from age 7 to age 18, you'll never know if they would have had a passion for softball, for example, and maybe played at a high level in that sport. It's just
Yeah,
that's what's so crazy to me. And I can't imagine a childhood of not trying different things because
totally.
now I just love sports so much. I just
Hmm.
love being active. Like I snowboard now, I play
Cool.
pickleball, and
Yeah.
I just love movement. And I
Hmm.
think now kids are forced to play one sport and they don't
Hmm.
really fall in love with it. They don't really have that passion.
Hmm.
So I recommend they sample in separate seasons as much as possible. And then within the season, my ideal schedule would be, I mean, at least 2 recovery days a week. I think it was the Australian football, it's their leading organization for their
Sure.
youth football programs, but
Hmm.
they had a whole template that it's 2 days off a week, never like 3 high intensity training sessions in a row, always have a
Hmm.
day in between. And I really liked that model. I really liked it for the recovery benefits, the getting
Hmm.
the skill acquisition benefits from practice, and then just the mental benefits from having that time off from these sessions. So
Totally.
I think they're onto something with it, but that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, I love that like 2 full days a week off. And so let's define the rest day there, like full day off. Like, what do you mean by that? Because I think a lot of people interpret this differently. So I'm curious, like, to really explicitly define it in your terms.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked because a lot of people do get this wrong. But by recovery day, I mean you have no organized training, even with a skills coach. You have no
Hmm.
organized practice with your team, no like speed coach number 2 session.
Yeah.
You are taking off from these organized sports obligations.
Hmm.
So if you want to go for like a swim with a friend, that's more like free play and it's non-impact. So if you're
Yeah.
playing a high impact sport like soccer, if you go for like a swim or you ride the bike around the neighborhood with dad, cool, that's active recovery, I would say.
Hmm.
But I would also recommend not to go for a long jog because that is
It's
impact
impact.
in
Yeah.
addition to soccer. I would
Yeah.
rather you go for a walk with your mom or dad or walk your dog. I think that's a really good way to recover, get the blood flowing, kind of calm the nervous system, get in the sun. So that's what I would do for a recovery day. And then
Hmm.
just eat food that's good for you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
have that good nutrition component.
Cool. Okay, I love that. Yeah, because at least in my neck of the woods, like you said, sport coach, session, speed coach too, getting in the mix. And it's like, if you just ran 20 sprints, like you did not recover today. So that did mess with the training plan. Okay, yeah. I'm glad you experienced that too. I guess in the vein of, thinking about, the we had an interesting conversation last week about it, but it's this cognitive piece where obviously ideal if the athlete develops it when they're a kid and they're doing 100-inch depth drops off the playground equipment and just like figuring it out when they weigh like 30 to 80 pounds. But now, as you have someone, let's say you have a 14-year-old freshman in high school who has not had, a lot of that play coming up, but they want to play college soccer. And, they've kind of specialized to this point. I'm curious, like, what are the different considerations to kind of get them up to speed? And specifically like a programming perspective, like what needs to be in there, so that the athlete can start to learn and develop and catch up, right, in that respect.
I'm a huge fan of reactive games.
Hmm.
So they're reacting to another opponent or maybe a cue that I'm giving out. And we do a lot of like chase races, mirroring drills. I do a lot of like different like hand waves and points. So just really like leaning into that creativity as a coach. I think there's so many ways to like make these games really fun and make them your own. And
Hmm.
I really like to make games where the athletes always have to have their head up and on a swivel. I think too often, especially, I keep referencing soccer because that was my sport, but too often in the soccer world, kids are always looking down
Hmm.
because they're always like looking at the ball at their feet with their skills trainer in their skills sessions. But soccer, a lot of it is off the ball. So I want my athletes to be aware of their surroundings, know when to make the next run, and have that anticipation and really develop it. So any drill where I can get their eyes up, we'll do a lot of like small-sided handball because they have to keep their head up since the ball's in the air, or dodgeball even is a really good agility
Hmm.
game.
Love
So
that.
yeah, just ways to really force the eyes up. We also do a fun chase game where there'll be a girl in front, and then the girl in front initiates the drill, and then the girl behind has to chase her as soon as she initiates the drill. So
Hmm.
yeah, just fun games like that. There's plenty of ways to do it. And I think that's where coaches can get really creative with it. And we do a
Yeah.
lot of those like in the summer off season when, there's not as many games and practices and we can fill that agility bucket more. I don't do it a lot in season because a lot of my girls practice 4 days a week and they're doing a ton of change of direction with their team. So
Totally.
we really lean into it in the off season more than in season.
Got it. Yeah, because it's not soccer, right? But it is working those like core components, I feel like, that are severely undertrained in a lot of programs, like actually getting like true athletic movement in that competitive setting is, yeah, it's difficult to replicate until you actually go do it. So I love what you're talking about with the obviously groups, are kind of an essential point with that. Do you have any recommendations for coaches that are like, hey, I'm working with one youth athlete at a time, right? Like what are kind of some different drills? And this is just pure X's and O's stuff here.
Yeah, I mean, I've had to get involved myself. I
Hmm.
don't do a lot of one-on-ones except with when I'm working with girls who come to me for ACL return to sport.
Hmm.
I have to get involved there, but I encourage the group setting as much as possible because the kids can compete against new people every
Yep.
time, and it's good for them to have different opponents. Like some opponents will be faster than them or stronger than them. So it's good to get that challenge. But yeah, if it's just you as the coach, you might have to get in there yourself for some mirror drills, or you can be standing there and just do some visual cues, which is totally
Hmm.
fine too. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. Like I said, like a hand wave, a point. I do a lot of like clap cues as well to initiate drills. So yeah, I think group ideal, but there's ways to get involved as a coach.
Got it. Yeah. So it sounds like it's visual and auditory cueing,
Yeah.
essentially is kind of how you're wrapping around. And maybe that's an interesting, kind of topic to dive deeper into for today is like, when you're in the gym and obviously you're not cueing them out of an ACL tear, right? Like, but what are some of the considerations you're making, cueing kids versus adults? Because I feel like those things are so different, especially with the movement literacy of a child being usually less than what the adult athlete has.
Yeah, so I do want to mention one thing about what coaches can do in the gym with as far as the eyes up and having that awareness.
Yeah.
Never let your athletes do a plyometric drill with their eyes down, ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
stop it. Stop doing broad jumps when they land and the eyes are down. Stop doing a depth drop and the eyes are down. Stop doing pogos and the eyes are down. Broaden their horizon and
Okay.
have
Yeah.
them look up and see the field. And again, if we're training plyometrics, we're really teaching them that reactive strength, ability to pump the brakes and then quickly explode. And in a game, we want them to have their eyes up and be aware during those movements.
Right.
So if we can replicate that in the gym with plyometrics the best we can, the better. And I've also found that keeping the eyes looking up during plyometrics and jumping and landing drills where we're sticking the landing, lower
Yeah.
body mechanics actually end up working out in themselves. And sometimes you don't
Mm,
need a cue, which is very interesting. But I've
cool.
seen if girls have their eyes down during like a single leg broad jump, for example, eyes are down, that means they're going to roll forward and they're going to be on their toes and fall forward. But when the eyes are up, then their chest is open. They're
Mm-hmm.
sitting into their hips. They're not falling forward. So it actually ends up helping lower body mechanics too.
Gotcha. And I guess like in trying to explain in my own words, effectively what you're saying is that when you cue eyes up, the athlete somewhat probably stops thinking about the landing mechanics and has to go based off of feel, which results in your what you're saying, a more advantageous kind of landing mechanic or, whatever attribute you're kind of going after with that. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
It
cool.
definitely helps with the lower body mechanics. It helps with very crisp landings. And then
Hmm.
for more of the like speed transfer plyometrics, like your pogos, it helps athletes to stay upright. And we want them to be upright for
Yeah,
max velocity. So
totally.
there's that component as well.
I dig that. Yeah, I guess one thing I've heard is like where balance is going to follow wherever the head is anyway. So if the head is down, you're going to go down, right? Like to an extent. And obviously like thinking about, the actual skill transfer there, they might have to hawk a ball down. They might need to make a pass or receive a pass, right? So is that kind of like what you're trying to really get out of them is like, hey, you are playing a sport, controlling your body like based on feel it like the foot, is probably going to be better than doing it with your eyes in that context. Is that kind of correct?
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
Anytime
cool.
we can get our athletes to keep their eyes up, head on a swivel, aware of their
Hmm.
surroundings, the better, because that's the game. Any
Yeah.
field or court-based sport, that's what's happening. So, and that's what we want to happen. And I
Got it.
always tell my athletes whenever they look down, I'm like, don't worry, the ground's
Hmm.
there. Look up. Like it's
Yep.
there, it's not moving. Like you'll feel it when you do your pogo.
Yep.
So it just takes like some like repetitive, hey, like eyes up or look at my hand.
Hmm.
Um, Imagine like a string's pulling your head up. So just cues like that to reinforce it.
Love that. Cool. So then I guess, with that, I'm really curious kind of how you set up an individual session. And obviously like the topic of today is the youth ACL epidemic. So I'm curious, like from an exercise selection standpoint, like what do you think are some of the best ways to train to reduce the risk of that injury? But I'm also curious about just like the programming on the whole, like big picture and small picture there. So wherever you want to start with that.
Yeah, so with ACLs, we touched on how the lack of motor skills young is a
Hmm.
problem, and we need to make sure if we're working with younger athletes, we start to include that variety into our sessions as well as those reactive components. And then the next piece is the strength training and really
Hmm.
progressing it with young athletes. I think more young athletes are starting to get into the gym now, but I don't think the quality of the training is where it could be. And I always try to
Agreed.
tell parents if your young athlete is not getting an individual program card or like their own program to look at, and they're not writing down their weights and progressing those weights, and they're just sticking with the same weights for the whole year, then that's a red flag, and you need to find a new strength professional to work with. And I've seen girls, especially, not wanting to load more and their
Mm.
coaches underestimating them. and they're just kind of
Yep.
sticking with a 20-pound goblet squat for 8 weeks. And it's like, we haven't progressed at all. Um,
Unreal. Yeah.
and even beyond that, I think with a lot of these main movements, like a front squat or a goblet squat, girls aren't getting the full range of motion and they're not being taught it. They're not mastering it first. I'm a
Hmm.
huge fan of going butt to heels and getting
Yeah.
in that deep range of motion and really lubricating the knee, but
Hmm.
also really gaining strength in that disadvantageous position.
Love that.
So I'm a huge fan of those deep range of motion squats. I'm a huge fan of ATG split squats as well.
Okay.
Just, I mean, flexibility benefits, hip
Totally.
mobility, quad firing, especially the VMO, which really stabilizes the knee. I think oftentimes we focus so much on our back squats and our front squats. We're not really focusing on that VMO. I'm a huge fan of Poliquin step ups.
Hmm.
So, and I'm
Can you
sure you,
explain that movement for everyone?
yeah, so your heel is it can either be elevated or flat
Hmm.
on a like a 2 to 6 inch surface. Some people go higher. I start girls on like a 25-pound plate
Yep.
and you just step down slowly. So it's really eccentric focus and you
Yeah.
really feel your VMO on fire, unlike any other quad dominant exercise we do. And I think it's very underutilized in a lot of
Yeah.
traditional strength and conditioning programs. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of Poliquin step ups, and I'll do like super high rep to start for youth, just body
Hmm.
weight, and then
Hmm.
we will progress it. And then they oftentimes feel stronger with those bigger movements after doing that. And those front squats are easier. Those ATG split squats are easier, or maybe a pistol squat becomes easier. So those are some of like my main quad movements. And
Cool.
then I'm a huge fan of your hex bar RDLs and
Hmm.
just really building the hamstrings because the hamstrings are what prevent the tibia from shearing forward
Hmm.
during a plant and tearing that ACL. So if the hamstrings are really strong in the back, it kind of pulls that tibia back from bringing that knee forward and increasing that rotational force. So
Yep.
huge fan of like really getting the hamstring strong relative to body weight with those bigger RDL lifts. And
Hmm.
then also with accessory hamstring work, really working on the distal hamstring. So right behind the knee,
Hmm.
your slider ham curls where you just go slow on the way out. So very eccentric focused, or you can do a stability ball focusing
Hmm.
on the eccentric portion, and then work up to your Nordics and
Yeah.
doing them
Yep.
well. Too often people butcher them
You
and
posted your story yesterday, I'm pretty sure, like
yeah.
stop butchering your Nordics.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, yeah, I reposted Mike Boyle because he's
Yep.
right. A lot of people, instead of staying straight and keeping
Yep.
tension in their glutes, they'll
Hmm.
flex the hips and then lose all the tension in their glutes.
Yep.
So even if like people can just go a little bit forward and still keep tension, I'd rather that than they go all the way down and they're like bent, kind of
Yeah.
cheating in a way. So
Yep.
yeah, we really work on keeping tension in the glutes during the Nordics and then
Yep.
getting girls to go all the way down.
Yeah.
Nothing works the hamstrings behind the knee harder than a Nordic that's done well. So I
Yeah.
really like those. I like single leg RDLs as well, really building that single leg strength.
Hmm.
And we do a lot of upper body strength as well. So different pull up, chin up variations, dumbbell rows, TRX rows. I'll do eccentric focus push-ups. I think it's great for youth because a lot of youth, when they do a full push-up, they're just dropping their hips. There's no
Hmm.
tension
Hmm.
in the glutes or core, and they're just weak there.
Yep.
So we just do a slow eccentric on the way down, and then we come back up. So and really make sure they're squeezing their glutes on that push-up. So those are some of my staples. And we already talked about plyometrics, but I do plyometrics year round. The
Yep.
the intensity and the volume just changes based on in season, off season, obviously, higher intensity in the off season
Mm-hmm.
and higher volume in season, but maybe more of those like low tier, less load on the knee plyometrics, but we're still getting athletes explosive. I think more athletes need to jump more. I don't think enough strength and conditioning programs have enough plyos in them. I think a lot of programs, it's like, hey, just do a
Mm-hmm.
broad jump for 2 sets of 5. And that's the only jump they did for the day. And I'm like, no, we can hop, we can leap, we can bound, and you
Mm-hmm.
can change that volume and intensity based on the time of the season you're in.
Yeah, and to that point, right, time of the season you're in and those volumes, like I feel like if you're the day before a game, 2 days before a game, like cranking set after set of Nordics is the obvious, like
Yeah.
don't do that,
Yeah.
right? But like what do you kind of consider when changing the volumes, changing the intensities for those off season versus in season?
Yeah, so off season we do more volume with our lift. So we'll do more exercises in a
Okay.
lift, and we'll also work in the 8 to 12 range for a lot of exercises.
Yep.
And obviously like progress to strength phase, power phase towards the end with the 3 to 6 rep range. In season, I'm hanging out to at 6 reps or less for like the bigger like CNS heavy lifts.
Yeah.
But some of the isolated work I'll do a little bit more because it's not so taxing on the central nervous system. So maybe like
Mm.
your isolated core work or like different hip bridge variations, I'll do a little bit more.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. One question I have in relation to all this is conditioning and kind of how you think about that element because obviously athletes get a lot in their sport, right? But there might be some athletes, like a bench player or, something like that who like isn't necessarily getting game time. And I'm curious how you build that in the off season and how you think about it in season, in those respects too.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one that I just started implementing, but I was starting to use GPS and also
Hmm.
RPE for girls who didn't have access to GPS sensors, and they were wearing them at their club practice, at their high school practice. And I was like, wait, I thought they were over training. And then I realized a
Hmm.
lot of them were under training. So during the school season, for example, a lot of it's really easy. It's very low level. They're
Yeah.
standing around at practice, like they're not even breaking a
Not even moving.
sweat.
Yeah.
Some of the games are easy and they're winning 8-0. So like the starters only play like 10 minutes, then come out.
Yeah.
So for girls like that, I do program conditioning in season. I used to not program it at all because I was like, oh, it's in season. But I realized like not everyone's getting the same stimulus in
Hmm.
season. Some
Hmm.
girls are starting and playing a lot, or the games are hard, so they don't really need it. But the girls who aren't playing a lot or their school season's really easy, I do sprinkle it in and we'll do just very basic, just tempo runs and just shorten the rest time throughout the season. We'll do some shuttle runs and manipulate the rest times to progress. So we just keep it really simple. But I think
Yeah.
if we can start to condition our bench players, if any coaches are working with them, they're
Hmm.
going to love it because I think oftentimes team coaches forget about the bench players and they don't develop and they don't really get better throughout the season. So I think strength coaches can really step in and, figure out, okay, do I have girls who or boys who aren't playing a whole lot and how can I help them?
Yeah. Well, that's a huge, I guess, insight that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, right? Especially in the context of, I mean, literally individualizing at that scale, right? To the athlete, like, hey, how many minutes did you get? Like, what was that like? And then building them up conditioning wise if they didn't get that stimulus. So
Mhm.
I'm curious, like, you know, that seems like a recommendation I haven't heard other coaches make. So, how have you seen that improve the athlete in season now? As you've like, obviously probably done that for a little while now. Like, what are the changes that you see with that?
I've found that girls, instead of slowing down at the end of the season, they become more explosive. So,
Oh,
a
cool.
lot of them who aren't playing or the games are easy, they're not really getting those fast actions.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just detraining all of that. So I've seen
Mm-hmm.
that improve, and I've just also seen the health of the athlete improve. So nothing is worse for an athlete who plays an easy high school season and they were
Mm-hmm.
hardly loaded, and then they have to transition to their travel season where it's like 5 times the load, and that's
Yeah.
when injuries can occur, is during those huge spikes in load where it's too much too soon and the athlete wasn't built up to handle it. So
Yeah.
I think doing this, there is a performance aspect to it, but there's also that injury minimization aspect to it.
Yeah. Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. And I'm curious, like in around some of the data, you bring up like if an athlete has that acute, spike, are you seeing mostly non-contact ACL? Are you seeing contact ACL? Like what are you seeing kind of in the data and at least your population that you work with?
So I do prehab, so I'm mainly in the performance space, but I also
Mm-hmm.
do that gray area when an athlete is
Mm-hmm.
cleared by their PT who had an ACL reconstruction and now they're in the return to sport phase with the strength coach. So I have a lot of girls
Yep.
coming to me during that phase. And yeah, the most recent girls I've had come to me during this, they all were contact injuries.
Oh,
And I'm
cool. Okay. Good to
seeing
know. Well,
more
not
of
cool.
that, which is interesting. And, I think the non-contact ones are much easier to avoid. But I think the contact ones, we really just have to do a better job of getting our girls really strong relative
Mm-hmm.
to body weight, getting them strong in those deep positions, getting them that sprint exposure, doing plyometrics year round, doing deceleration year round. I think
Mm-hmm.
too often we lean one way in a program and some people are just doing strength. You have to do it all. You're just
Mm-hmm.
either doing more of something or less of the other things depending on the season. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen
Mm-hmm.
a lot of contact ACL girls come to me during the return to sport phase.
Got it. Super cool way to think about it too. Just, we're just changing dials throughout the year, like what's going up and down. Could
Yep.
you like and again, super practical here, like what are the dials that you feel like we're playing with, when we're writing a program for an athlete, if you can name them?
So strength,
Mm-hmm.
plyometrics, so keeping
Biometrics.
athletes twitchy, really continuing to build that reactive strength.
Mm-hmm.
Deceleration,
Mm-hmm.
so just landing, which is very different than your plyos. So just
For
sticking
sure.
a landing, different planes, double egg, single egg, depth
Mm-hmm.
drops,
Yep.
and then sprint exposure,
For an
and
exposure.
then your agility, so the
Mm-hmm.
reactive component combined
Mm-hmm.
with change of direction, and then conditioning. So those would be my main ones. And
Yeah.
then within those, you can argue, well, there's mobility within that, there's stability, which I think they're all a part of those,
Okay.
especially in those deeper range strength movements where we're squatting butt to heels, where we're doing ATG split squats. You get the
Mm-hmm.
mobility and the stability from those movements, and better
Yep.
yet, when you load them.
Yeah. And talk to me, I guess, about the mechanisms that are going on when you express that full range of motion with an athlete, because I think that's an important concept that there's so much debate on, right? I see athletes loading or excuse me, coaches loading their athletes up with like 500 pounds to a quarter box squat, right? And it's like, okay, but what about this other side of the coin, right? So can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I really like doing the squats. I mean, a lot of people say it's like sneaks to cheeks or ass to grass.
Sneaks to
Um,
cheeks. I haven't heard that one. That's awesome.
yeah,
I
that's a
love
really good
that.
one. I got
Cool.
that one from Zach Woodward. He's a PT in
Cool.
or a return to play in Colorado. But
Nice.
yeah, I just really like the hip mobility component
Mm-hmm.
of it, the ankle mobility component, and we really need good ankle mobility and dorsiflexion for those deceleration and cutting movements.
Mm-hmm.
Just makes athletes more efficient. And then just for like something like a ass to grass squat, just really building that quad strength.
Mm.
You'll find that your quads are more on fire in that range, even
Yep.
if you're going a little
Agreed.
bit lighter than what you do on a quarter squat. It's really insane.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're also like on the internal level of the joints and the cartilage, it's really starting to lubricate the knee. So
Hmm.
I have a lot of girls who they'll come to me with knee pain and then we'll do these full range squats. And you would think that it would aggravate the knee a little bit more, but it actually helps them become
Yeah,
pain
I
free.
found
So
that too.
I'm bought into it. I
Hmm.
only recently started doing it like 3 years ago, and it's very powerful for
Yeah,
athletes who are constantly in pain with their knee and their ankle as well. It's really, really beneficial.
I love it, dude. That's awesome. And I guess like, want to make sure we have time here kind of for the Q&A of stuff people have asked. Great question to start off with. You've worked with hundreds of young athletes. What's the one lesson you hope every athlete carries with them long after they stop playing sports?
Oh, this is a good one.
It's a great
So
one.
this is kind of my mission of why I do what I do, but
Yep.
like personally, since I fell in love with strength training so young, I encourage all athletes to start it young, just
Hmm.
for the length and health of their sports career, but also you get into such good habits that you continue it when you're done sports. And we all know it's important to maintain muscle as you get older. And at that
Hmm.
point, you're a lifelong athlete. So you might not
Yeah.
be playing competitive sports, but you want to be able to run around with your kids without huffing and puffing, or you don't want to have like joint pain or arthritis or trouble walking to your mailbox when you're older.
Hmm.
I encourage athletes to always keep strength training in their lives. I like that's more of what I get excited about now is when I see
Mm.
girls who I've worked with for so long who are still doing this stuff and they're out of
Yeah.
college now. They're done playing, but they're still getting in the gym. And I like to see that the most.
I love that, dude. That's such a great way of like thinking about just the lifetime development, right? And such, and yeah, different stages of life, like what you want to do with that. Cool. Um, Next one. If a young athlete is torn between training harder to perform now versus training smarter to protect their future, which advice would you give them? Another awesome one.
Yeah, I mean, I would say you can do both. You can train
Okay. Yeah.
smarter and harder. And I get this from Dr. Tim Gabbett, who is an
Okay.
expert in load management. He came up with the acute to chronic workload ratio. And
Mm,
a lot of the research says if you keep your chronic workload high and you continue to progress it, still getting your recovery days in between, and you don't have those huge spikes and dips in loads, the healthier you're going to be. So he argues you can still train smart, but you can still train harder to prepare for the demands of your sport. So I like
wow.
both.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Of
training
course.
harder is not grinding 7 days a week. Training harder is about intentional training and knowing when you have high intensity days and
Hmm.
going all out on those, knowing when you have lower intensity days. So I think you can do both.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. That's such a good way of thinking about it. Like why sacrifice one versus the other? And then another one here. Any thoughts around surface play when it comes to ACL/injury prevention in general? Regarding training in the weight room, the surface is different than if you're running on the track versus if you're a lacrosse player on turf and so on and so forth. So how do you think about those surfaces?
So if you're a strength and conditioning professional, you need to be training athletes on all surfaces. You can't just
Hmm.
be hiding in the gym. You have to be able to go somewhere where you take your athletes out on the grass or on a track or on the turf. If we
Hmm.
just do, again, if we just do the strength piece on the gym mats, we are doing our athletes a disservice. So we have to do all the other things like the sprint drills,
Hmm.
the pogos, the plyometrics. We have to do them on those surfaces. I think we can't just be married to the gym and just getting under the
Hmm.
iron. It has to be all of it. So
Sure.
you might
And
need to get to a local track. I do
yeah.
that too with a lot of my girls. I train in my backyard. We have a 50-yard field space on
Hmm.
grass. So yeah, you have to find a way to get out to the field. If you are a strength and conditioning professional, you have to be out on the field.
Yep. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And now, like what considerations are you making on those different surfaces? I'm very curious your thought on that.
None. I
Yeah, just
mean,
do different ones.
yeah, yeah,
I
do
love that.
different
Yeah.
ones because especially soccer here in Florida, a lot of girls we are playing on a lot of grass, but once in a while they'll be on
Nice.
turf. So I do have turf in
Yep.
my gym to give them
Hmm.
that exposure, but we can't control what surface our athletes play on, and you can
Hmm.
make the argument, "Oh, well, ACLs are increased on turf." Well, what are you going to do? Tell everyone to shut down every turf field in the country? I mean, you can't do
Right.
that
Yeah.
because
No.
it's more economical for these people. We're not getting rid of turf anytime soon. So all we can do is control what we can as strength and conditioning
Hmm.
coaches, train our athletes all these buckets to develop
Hmm.
them, and then train them on these different surfaces. That's all we can do. Whether you want to make the argument for turf and ACLs or not, can't change that. You can only change how you prepare your athletes.
I love that. I know there was I think it was Marvin Harrison, senior wide receiver for the Cowboys, and he, or Colts, he was like, I play barefoot basketball on the concrete. I knew I could take anything like that was going on the turf. So ever since he said that, it's always stuck out, like, the surface training and all that. So yeah,
Yeah.
appreciate the insight there, and especially
And
just
I
being
would
open-minded to all of it. Right?
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
And there's two other things. So, one thing, if you're working with return to play athletes from an ACL, they
Hmm.
should not be doing anything on concrete.
Yep.
Just because of the loading on the knee during
Brutal.
that rehab. You don't want that. And then the second thing with the surface is you can also control the footwear. So,
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
athletes
Yep.
who wear cleats, you want to recommend, okay, you want to get a cleat that can handle turf and have enough traction, but the spike shouldn't be so long. So, there's a
Hmm.
lot of cleat companies starting to make the shorter spikes so that there's more
Yep.
stability of the ankle. Which is
Cool.
great because
Didn't know
back in the
that.
day when
Yeah.
I was playing, we only had those long spikes on turf and everyone was just rolling their ankles like with no
That
one around them. So
that happened to me all the
uh,
time. I was like, dude, this
yeah.
is
So you can recommend
not
good
right.
footwear. And if you
Yeah.
work with female athletes, Adidas just came out with a female specific cleat to mold to the
Cool.
anatomy of the female foot. And then also
Hmm.
Ida Sports has a lot of female cleats as well.
Okay, that's so good to know. Yeah, because I feel like that's just intel that people just wouldn't even know to look for. So that's
And I've
huge.
tried them on. They're not affiliated with me. I don't sell them, but they're right
Yeah.
there. I'm trying
Oh
to
yeah, yeah, right in the back there.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
Cool.
they have a
I like
wider
this.
toe
Yep.
box.
Yep.
So for athletes with wide feet, bony feet, so comfortable. And
Beautiful.
comfort's important for footwear.
Yeah, amen to that. Yeah, if you're just thinking about how bad the bottoms of your feet hurt the whole time, probably not
Yeah.
performing too well. Cool. Last one here then for today. How can you educate young athletes and empower them to advocate for proper S&C as it relates to preventing ACL injuries with their coaches if it is not being considered?
Mm.
That's an
Yeah, the
interesting one.
coach is always the hard one to win over. But
Hmm.
yeah, some coaches will listen, some won't. So just putting that out there, don't get down on yourself if people don't pay attention to you. But I've recently started to just go out and offer to talk to teams
Mm,
and just to
cool.
educate and connect with coaches. And, I'm in my 14th year of doing this, and I offer a lot of it for free just to get the word out and to help.
Yeah.
Because if you can help a coach, then you can help like 20 kids.
Yeah.
So just think of it
Amen.
that way. And then you build that good relationship, and then,
Hmm.
maybe they'll refer to you or whatever. But,
Sure.
at the very least, you got the word out. So I think as strength coaches, we have to kind of put ourselves out there more to,
Hmm.
not see coaches as the bad guys, but start to work with them and offer
Yeah.
education.
For sure. You're always gonna have the people that don't buy in, right?
Oh
But
yeah, I
but
still get
I'm
it.
sure, dude. Yeah, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
but yeah, at the end of the day, if you can have them make a few more critical decisions in consideration of the athlete, I feel like that's, yeah, like you're saying, like you help one coach, you help 20 athletes, if not more. So I really love that. Well, Erica, I guess like to wrap us up for today, one, thank you so much. This was such a fun conversation. I feel like, I learned a ton and I'm sure everyone kind of here did as well. But where can we find you and how can we kind of learn more from you as we go on from here?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Fit Soccer Queen, so very
Hmm.
easy to remember.
It's an
And
awesome
then
name.
my podcast is the Strong Female Athlete Podcast, and it's only on YouTube. So just YouTube, the Strong Female Athlete Podcast. And on there, I have a ton of experts who have dedicated their lives to female athlete research, performance, nutrition, health.
Mm,
I learn a lot from my guests, so definitely
yeah.
recommend everyone checks that out.
Sweet. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, more and more follow-on information. I'm sure people have tons of questions, but the notes are taken and everything. So, yeah, thank you, and really grateful for you being here and everyone who attended today. Thanks for making the time.
Thank
Appreciate it, and
you.
have a wonderful day. All right. See ya.